Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 189, recording on Friday morning, August 7th. We are 7 practices into training camp, Minnesota Vikings training camp, that is. 2 padded practices, including the lengthy one on Wednesday evening. We're going to talk all about that and just give some top-of-the-line thoughts on the quarterback competition, on the rookies who are standing out, on the run game, which I wrote about in depth at The Athletic. So a lot of conversation on a ton of different subjects over the course of today's show. If you're new here and watching on YouTube, first, thanks for being here. Much appreciated. We do this show 2 times a week, every week, including throughout the season. And it's a way for me, who covers the team for The Athletic, to speak directly to you guys, answer some questions, and have a bit more of a, direct relationship where you get to feel a little bit of how I think about it on a day-to-day basis, what I hear on a day-to-day basis, etc. So thank you for being here. If you're watching YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, you can rate and review and follow us. Give us 5 stars. I believe that probably helps us out. Unsurprisingly, whether you're tired of it or not, we are going to begin with the quarterbacks. Probably not going to frame it as the big quarterback competition of 2026 because of what has been pretty evident through 7 practices and what has seemed pretty clear for months now. But we'll just start with Kyler Murray. And I would just, the first thing that comes to mind for me when I think about watching him in recent days, really since the last time we recorded a show earlier this week, is that he's still pushing the ball downfield. I mean, nothing about the circumstances of this training camp have prevented Kyler Murray from trying to attack vertically. And that's really not a surprise to me, having spoken to people who have been around him, former teammates, former coaches, executives. Like, this guy wants to be a passer. The ability to utilize his legs is something that, when you are as talented as he is and has been at that, it's going to be a feature of what you do. But there's no question that he has attempted, Kyler Murray, more downfield throws than the other quarterbacks, specifically J.J. McCarthy, in this training camp. And on Wednesday, I wouldn't call it perfect by any means, just like I wouldn't call any aspect of Kyler Murray's performance through 7 practices perfect. But just some throws come to mind. There was a deep downfield throw to Juwan Jennings on kind of a high cross over the middle of the field. There was another deep ball kind of over the middle to Ty Felton, who continues to stand out in his second year at receiver. There was the throw down the left sideline to end the 2-minute drill that hung up in the air a little bit. Justin Jefferson snatched it over the top of Isaiah Rodgers and Theo Jackson. And when I saw that play happen in real time, I thought, that's a Justin Jefferson play more than anything else. The quarterback probably should usually get some kind of props for just throwing the ball up to Justin Jefferson, but by no means did I feel like that was perfect ball placement. And so I believe in the social media post that I put out after watching that play and seeing it result in what the Vikings gave was a touchdown, was like, Justin Jefferson did a very Justin Jefferson thing, and, Kyler Murray was rewarded with a touchdown. So have tried to be very, as I always do, just objective and clear-minded with the way that we look at it. And that's why, I'd say by no means has it been anywhere near perfect for Kyler Murray. There have been many instances in previous practices where there's some miscommunication, where on some of the Vikings passing game's option routes, which for you guys who are like, what does that mean? Sometimes in the Viking system, receivers have the opportunity, depending on what they see from the coverage, to either stay vertical with the route, to take an angle on a route over the middle of the field, to take a comeback because the defender's playing over the top. And it's kind of the responsibility of the quarterback in many of these concepts to read it out kind of on the fly and adapt as the receivers are adapting in real time. And so for me, it's felt like that has been a moving target and a work in progress. Kyler trying to sync up with kind of what the receivers are identifying on the fly. So that's been something that stood out. I think the other thing that I will be continuing to watch over the course of this training camp and into the early part of the regular season is, what does Kyler look like when there's interior pressure? And I've talked about this. I mean, I talked about this on KFAN with Dan Barrero weeks ago. I reiterated it with him, I think, earlier this week. I've spoken about it on KFAN with Paul Allen, who I usually talk to every week on Fridays, and plan on doing the Friday Football Feast, this year, which has been a blast over time. But I've talked about how much the people who have been around Kyler discuss, pinpoint, highlight, spotlight what happens when Kyler Murray faces interior pressure because of his stature, which people like to joke about. This is not a joking, aspect or component. That's just not what I do. Like, when you are at that stature, and there is interior pressure and there are bodies in your face, I think it becomes pretty clear that Kyler Murray's eyes can drop, that it can affect his vision a little bit, which can then throw off the rhythm and timing of the passing concept. And so I bring it up just to say that there have been sequences where there is some kind of interior pressure, and Kyler Murray, that's when he starts to kind of move a little more scattershot within the pocket and then potentially extend. Now, one of the benefits of Kyler Murray is that he has the athletic ability to extend and create explosives from that. But I just, want to reference it as something that I will continue to be watching moving forward, just to kind of be clear about what it's looked like through 7 days. I do think, though, like, when you just take an overall look at what Kyler's been able to do, the consistency needs to be more refined. That's for certain. But he has made some really impressive throws. The line of scrimmage and pre-snap operation has not been helter-skelter. The way that, I think one of the narratives around Kyler Murray was his aptitude, intelligence, ability to pick up the system. Like, from my understanding, that has just not been an issue. Now, the way they are incorporating new run game concepts and some things that we're going to get into a little bit later, like, that's going to require the installation process probably to take it a little more slow than maybe some years past. But I would say, like, someone asked me earlier this week about how I'd compare Kyler Murray and what I've seen to what I remember recalling from Sam Darnold's first training camp with the Vikings. And, like, I think while Sam's stature definitely stood out, I think while his arm talent and ability to really get the ball down the field, so I'm talking 60 yards plus, like, that was pretty evident. I would say there's not much difference in my mind in terms of some of the up, downs, highs, lows nature of what it's looked like. So it's not a comparison. They're two totally different guys with two wildly different levels of experience and degrees of experience to this point in their careers. But I think that's a good barometer for evaluation and comparison. So thought I would wade into it. As far as JJ McCarthy, I would say every practice there are a couple throws where you nod your head and you're like, okay, that's probably what you want to see. The issue with that, obviously, is that the name of the game for JJ McCarthy is and has been consistency. Can you do it time and time again throughout each individual practice, day after day after day? And I would say the biggest thing that's just caught my eye standing on the perch behind the Vikings practice fields every single practice has just been that when JJ McCarthy drops back to pass and he goes through his progressions from the left to the right, 1 to 2 to 3, it just feels like there are a couple extra ticks, hitches, beats, however you want to describe it, then there need to be, for him to get to the right spot at the right time. And that has been a theme now. I thought it was a theme throughout some of the struggles in 2025. And it's just something that's shown up ever since then. And whether you attribute that, whether the Vikings staff or as fans, you want to attribute, I think there's a lot of routes you could go. He's only played 10 games, since, the torn meniscus. So that could be a part of it, and just continuing to try to, acclimate to what the speed of the NFL level is. I think that's part of it. I think in some of these training camp practices, perhaps he's working with groups of receivers who aren't wide open to where it makes it easy to just uncork the ball. But at some point, it's hard to just continuously, I don't want to call them excuses, but bring up these variables if you're not seeing a consistency and a decisiveness just in how he goes about, some of these pure progression concepts. I'd say with JJ, the other component, and we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show, I've written about it continuously, is just layering of the football and the ability to get the ball up and down with certain trajectories, certain speeds, certain spins, certain locations when you absolutely have to. And there's no denying that when there is somebody open or it's a tight window and JJ McCarthy needs to rip a fastball, he can do that. And he can put the ball on the pass catcher's chest. It's more when you have to anticipate or you have to apply trajectories. Like the golf analogy would be when you have to shape certain shots. In golf, you listen to players talk. Like some guys, like Bubba Watson, for example. And I know we're waiting out on a tangent here, but like some guys have the ability to really shape shots, and some guys struggle more with it. And when I do credit JJ McCarthy throughout this training camp, because I do feel like there have been like a handful of times where you can visually kind of observe him trying to get the ball up and down, move the ball a little bit. The complication comes when it's high or it sails or it's not as accurate. And it at times it can feel like the thinking of trying to do it overcomes or overmatches just the natural feel for being able to do it. And I just, like I mentioned Sam Darnold, but when I just think about some of the throws he made in 2024, both throughout the season and on the practice field, there were so many instances, and there you can just go back on the tape and see him where you're like, I don't really know how he got the ball up and down into that specific window, but there was just a naturalness to his ability to do that. And again, that's not me saying Sam Darnold's the perfect quarterback. That's not me, sticking it to the fact that Sam Darnold, it's just the comparison of a guy I saw every single day. So that's why I bring it up. And then the last thing with JJ is just like, having watched the first 7 practices, I don't, as an outside observer, and this is me putting on my analyst hat, which is never the most comfortable thing to do because, as I've said many times on this podcast, there are so many aspects to this, and I did not play the quarterback position at this level. But I would just say, as the casual observer standing on that perch like I have every single day, I don't feel confident in saying that I've noticed or identified or observed just a drastic amount of growth or development in what I'm seeing from JJ McCarthy on the field. And I said on this show months ago, I've written it plenty of times and taken criticism for it at times from Vikings fans who understandably want to see their quarterback of the future thrive. But I've said that unless JJ McCarthy made a massive leap throughout this training camp and showcased that every single day, it was going to be hard for him to prove that he was deserving of the 2026 starting job for a team, a head coach, or an organization with a superstar receiver that is fixated on winning in the short term right now. The team hasn't won a playoff game under Kevin O'Connell. Justin Jefferson is 27 in his prime. It is a very competitive guy who wants to success. He wants to be in the thick of the most high leverage competition. And you've got an organization that hasn't won a playoff game since 2019. And so winning in the short term, I've said this, was always going to lead to the Vikings choosing the quarterback that gives them the best chance to win right now, even if that is at the expense of the long term of what JJ McCarthy's development could be. But it's not Major League Baseball where you can navigate or weave through a season or two at the expense or for the benefit of development of players who are at the AA or AAA level. That's just not how it goes in the NFL, for better or for worse. And so that's why I maintain that Kyler Murray is the overwhelming favorite to be the starter. And I mean, we'll see when Kevin O'Connell is prepared and comfortable and convicted enough to make this declaration. But when he does, I think the next most interesting conversation and question becomes, how does JJ McCarthy feel about it? How do the people around him feel about it? And then what does it look like moving there from a depth chart perspective in the quarterback room? And that's obviously getting ahead of ourselves. I wanted to be very observational, very real, provide as much clarity as possible as I can at this juncture. And hopefully we did that on the way to probably just foreshadowing what the conversation could, perhaps will become. So that on the quarterback conversation, that's about all I've got before a weekend that will have a practice Friday, Saturday, and then night practice on Sunday in front of the fans, which is always one of my favorite evenings of training camp because, I don't know, you get to be out there on the field. You get to just see the joy of the people in this town, like you guys who care as much about this team and make it easy for me not to take the opportunity that I have for granted. So looking forward to that. Before we move forward and talk about the run game, which I wrote about at The Athletic, talk about some rookies that I want to discuss before we wind up or round out this week, I do want to talk about our presenting sponsor, First Resource Bank. So if you don't know about First Resource Bank, you really should. They're a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area run by really, really good people. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, and Charlie Anderson are gigantic Vikings fans who have built a bank with Midwest, Dakota roots, with branches all over the place in the Minneapolis area. They've got an awesome online banking platform that for me, since I moved up here from Kansas City, where I covered Major League Baseball for 3 years, it's the banking platform that I've used. It makes it really easy to move money in, to move money out. If I need a cashier's check because I'm moving into a new apartment, I can hop into a bank and they make it really easy. And then, I mean, the best part of it is like they are connectors within the community. So if you have a business and you want, a bridge in many ways, that's kind of what First Resource Bank has built, and it's what they provide. And they also love this team that you guys love. So pretty, just awesome to be able to partner with them as long as we have on the Alec Lewis Show. The show is also sponsored by Pro MN Athletics. So you guys probably love football. Maybe you have a kid who plays football. Maybe you have friends whose sons play football. If that's the case, I cannot say enough about Pro MN Athletics. 3 guys, Kurt, Graham, and Tanner, a couple years ago, they're like, we love football in this state. We want youth football to be as good as possible. We want the most optimal training, premier opportunities for like-minded, motivated kids to be around each other. So they created Pro MN Athletics. And what it is a company that throughout many cycles of the calendar, spring, summer, fall, they've got academies for quarterbacks, for receivers, offensive line play. Throughout the summer, recently they had a 7-on-7 league. A month and a half ago, they had a faith walk for some of the most highly touted high school quarterbacks in Minnesota. And I mean, some of the coaches are former college players. Tanner is Tanner Morgan, former Gophers quarterback, who is just an absolute stud when it comes to mechanical development. So, I would just say, if you know anybody who has, hopes of playing in high school and college, who's really committed to playing this game in the Minnesota area, please check out and pass along the information of Pro MN. Because I love the sport, it's been awesome partnering with them on the Alec Lewis Show. All right, I'm going to save the rookies and the rookie conversation for last because it's a fun one. There's a lot of excitement and understandable and valid excitement around some of those guys. But I want to dive deep on the run game here because I wrote about it. I I would like to believe as comprehensively as I could for now. At The Athletic, I believe that story ran on Thursday morning, August 6th. So if you want every nook and cranny of what that story was, I believe the headline, should probably go make sure I know that correctly. Why the Vikings run game is the most important subject at training camp that nobody is talking about. So I truly believe that. That wasn't a headline just to bring people in, but and I want to explain a little bit why. So the way I'll start is we could talk about Kevin O'Connell and the run game and commitment and all of that, but I think it's almost more interesting to start in this way. Like, because opposing defenses who the Vikings face, because they play so much double coverage to Justin Jefferson, those defenses often have to use two safeties deep, which means they then have to stop the run with creativity. This is kind of a simple math problem. Like, this is the easiest way for you guys to think about this is math. The more guys you have closer to the line of scrimmage defensively, the more likely it is that you can plug up the gaps in the run game. The fewer guys you have near the box, because you need those guys in coverage, the harder it's going to be for you to stop the run effectively. And when you have fewer guys near the box, to try to stop the run, you got to get creative. So how does that happen? Well, these defensive coordinators in the era of 2026 are really, really smart. They will slant the defensive line into different gaps and use linebackers to fill the gaps that they've slanted from. So there's like a lot. I mean, I wish I had a whiteboard to draw it up for you guys, but the best way to imagine it is because there's less bodies near the line of scrimmage, defensive coordinators have to become, I don't know, whether it's physics professors to utilize certain amount of players to stop the run game and plug different holes. So that's really how it plays out. And that's what opposing defenses have done against the Minnesota Vikings now for multiple years, because they must apply and allocate secondary defenders to limit Justin Jefferson. Because if you don't do that, then Justin Jefferson is most likely going to ruin the game if the Vikings have appropriate level quarterback play. So in the past, the way the Vikings have run the football is very much the offensive line is trying to get off the ball fast, but because there's all this movement from the defense, they're having to sort through it all on the fly to try to ensure that there is a really good lane for a running back. And that's really hard. Why? Because these players move really fast. The linebackers are really sharp. They diagnose things really quickly. Their mental calculations work really fast. And so the offensive line has to match that with speed, discipline, and just perfect positioning, frankly, positioning while moving. And that's a really, really hard challenge. And so what the Vikings did this offseason, and what Kevin O'Connell really did in terms of how he reviewed it, the decision-making that he made based upon it was, okay, while it improved in 2025, the Vikings run game did by almost every meaningful metric, the Vikings still didn't really rank in the top 10 in anything meaningful other than explosive play rate. And so, understandably, Kevin O'Connell, a guy who wants to be at the top of his craft, decided to kind of reshape, implement an overhaul of what they wanted to do with the run game. So instead of trying to sort things out on the fly, the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell decided, or really charted the path towards, how can we, instead of trying to react based upon how things look after the snap, how can we create so much confusion for defenses pre-snap that there becomes an advantage once the ball is snapped, because then you're forcing the defense to make really quick decisions on the fly. And so that process And that philosophy led them to not retain or renew the contract, of former offensive line coach Chris Cooper, who's now in Philadelphia. From there, the Vikings interviewed multiple candidates for the O-line position. One of the candidates they interviewed for that spot was Frank Smith, the former offensive coordinator in Miami. Side note, the Miami Dolphins, they didn't have a lot of playoff success over the last 4 years, but they did become one of the teams within the league that everybody, executives, coaches, wanted to talk about for their creativity in the run game. So Frank Smith, who was the offensive coordinator and right-hand man to Mike McDaniel, was in the building and a part of conversations that helped spearhead and design one of the more creative run games in the NFL. So Kevin O'Connell interviews Frank Smith for the offensive line coach, and ultimately they decide rather than to make Frank Smith the offensive line coach, they will put him in a position with the title assistant head coach and pair that with Keith Carter, who had exposure to San Francisco 49ers style run game, just like Frank Smith did because he was with Mike McDaniel. When Keith Carter worked in Atlanta with Kyle Shanahan as the assistant offensive line coach, and he worked in Tennessee with Matt LaFleur, who spent a lot of time, obviously, with Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta. And so that became the personnel tasked with carrying out this new vision. So from a run game perspective, what are the Vikings focusing on? If you talk to any offensive lineman, if you talk to the running backs, if you talk to quarterbacks, if you talk to coaches, if you talk to executives, if you talk to Nolan Teasley, they will all tell you that one of the main priorities is running off the ball, firing off the ball, and it's less about thinking specifically where to be than ensuring that you are firing off with physicality and intent right at the snap. And so, that's really the genesis or the kind of hub of what they're trying to get accomplished. Now, paired with that is the running back's track in terms of where they're angled once they get the football is very defined. And then their job responsibilities based upon what they see is also very defined. That also forces the quarterback to be very intentional about how quick they get the ball to the running back so the running back can then be disciplined in making those decisions. So it all really ties together. The Vikings have also, and it's been apparent through training camp, and I wrote this at The Athletic, utilized some formations, some motions, some shifts that I can just say, having covered the team for 4 years, I've never seen. And so I think that speaks a little bit to the eye candy that the Vikings want to implement and incorporate pre-snap to cause problems and extra kind of thinking in the defensive mind. So an analogy I used for what the purpose behind all of this is the Minnesota Timberwolves trading for LaMelo Ball. It's obviously not an apples to apples comparison, and it's very different in some ways. But part of the reason the Minnesota Timberwolves traded for LaMelo Ball was to remove the potential that opposing defenses can always load up with 2 defenders, 3 defenders, gap help on Anthony Edwards. If there's another creator, if there's a guy who can pass the ball like LaMelo Ball can, then potentially the opposition has to shade off of Anthony Edwards, which gives him more space. And that's really what the result of this renewed run game at its best, if it comes to fruition. And there are caveats that are important to say, like this run style can often take time for everything to sync up. And the Vikings are betting that it's not going to take a season's worth of time. They are betting that the time can produce itself through training camp. And we'll see if that happens or not. I'm just kind of trying to describe the intent behind it. But if the Vikings, philosophy, ideology comes to fruition, and defenses have to be more mindful of what the Vikings are doing in the run game because they are ripping off 10-yard runs, 12-yard runs, chunks consistently in the run game, then it becomes in many ways for the defense I laugh using this phrase, but kind of a pick your poison proposition. Do you want to allow the opposing offense to dominate you on the ground and rip off 10 to 12 yard runs consistently? Or are you more willing to move bodies from the secondary toward the line of scrimmage, which then opens more space up for the receiving core? And when you can force defenses into kind of, playing in this uncertain world, then you are doing what Kevin O'Connell talked about wanting to do when he first took this job, which was to, provide the illusion of complexity, marry the run and the pass, and dictate and be the aggressor as an offense. So, again, there's a lot of caveats that are worth talking about. The commitment to it. Can you rip off 10, 12-yard chunks and then continue to be committed to ripping off 10 and 12 more? I think that's something that we will all watch and evaluate together. But fundamentally, the way the Vikings are teaching this, the concepts that they are focused on, and then some of the pre-snap, I would just say, creativity and eye candy is all very much different than it's been under Kevin O'Connell. And so you might be sitting there asking, well, why did it take to this point? You might be, skeptical that it produces results. And I think all of that stuff, there's rhyme or reason to it and is worth evaluating. But I just wanted to talk about it, and I really wanted to write about it in depth at The Athletic because it's something that I do think is going to be a conversation and going to be important. And then lastly, we'll just get into the rookies. So I'll just start with Max Bredesen because it dovetails with that discussion. Max Bredesen has mixed in a lot with the starters at fullback. That's pretty impressive for him to already be, display the aptitude that he can kind of, that he has already picked up the offense enough to be incorporated this early. And I expect the usage. I mean, the Miami Dolphins with Frank Smith in 2025 used fullbacks, I believe, almost 25% of snaps. The Vikings were around 9%. Or maybe 8%. And so, I definitely would expect an uptick there. There's no doubt about it. So Max Bredesen's one of the rookies who I've had my eyes on. I'd say the star of training camp in some ways has been Chuck Demmings, the cornerback from Stephen F. Austin. If you're watching this or listening to it on Friday, August 7th, got another story at The Athletic about who Chuck Demmings is, how he's gotten to this point, what he's already accomplished, how he goes about his business. So tried to do something on the guy who I really believe is the star. But I mean, physically, athletically, explosiveness wise, there has been nothing with Chuck Demmings that's really been left on the table. He's really proven it day after day. And it's been fun to watch a guy who you can tell is having a lot of fun doing it. I'd say Jake Golday, we've talked about him a little bit, but the versatility really, really stands out. The fact he's already getting snaps on the edge and he started, acclimating to Brian Flores' defense at off-ball linebacker. I think that says a heck of a lot about just what he can intake mentally. And then he's just a massive human being to be a linebacker. And then I would just say, whether it's Caleb Banks, Dominique Orange, Caleb Tiernan, I think these guys, we'll see with Caleb Banks, but I think these guys should get some run in the preseason. So to watch him in games and have the film and the tape to evaluate should be pretty cool, pretty fun. I mean, to have three guys in my mind that I'm already, rookie wise fixating on and have been really impressed by, I think is a stark difference from some past years. And then, Jacoby Thomas, I think, another preseason candidate. The undrafted safety, Jacob Thomas, is another one. So going to be really interesting to just watch the progression of this class. But I would say if you're Rob Brzezinski, who filled in and did a draft for the first time in his lengthy career, you probably feel pretty good about the decisions made, although it's quite early. Before we hop out of here, I want to mention one last sponsor, Aquarius Home Services, the independent authorized Connecticut dealer. It's summer, and that means home improvement season at Aquarius. They know that managing a household and all of the expenses that come with it is no easy task. They also know how important having worry-free water in your home is. Your family deserves water you can trust. Use it every day for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and bathing. That's why they are excited to share their summer trade-in and trade-up program. Trade in your old water softener and trade up to a Connecticut whole home water treatment system. The best part, you can get an additional $500 off on top of their summer sale prices. Say goodbye to hard water, rust stains, and unwanted contaminants, and hello to a cleaner, worry-free water flowing through every faucet, all day, every day. It starts with a free water test. Schedule at AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, they have earned the right to be recommended. That'll do it for a late week edition of the Alec Lewis Show. That's episode 189. Appreciate you being here. Please check out all the stories at The Athletic that I've mentioned and teased a little bit on this show. We're in the thick of it and having a blast doing the job. Hopefully providing you guys a level of insight and perspective that you deserve, given how much you care about this team, and appreciate First Resource Bank, ProMN, Aquarius for their support. Any other questions you got, toss them in the comments. Toss them at me on social media at Alec_Lewis, at Alec Lewis Show. And with that, enjoy a beautiful weekend here in the Twin Cities. We will talk to you very, very soon.